Tak og godmorgen alle sammen. I promised Anders to do this in English, so you don't have to be bothered with my Danish. Doesn't always go down that well, but even though you'll probably be able to understand. It's always a pleasure to be back at UNC. I think we should also give Anders and UAS Norway a bit of credit. This is not the biggest and most important show in Norway. It's definitely the biggest and most important show in Scandinavia, if not Europe. There are very, very few drone conferences in Europe that actually get a crowd of this size. So thanks for that, and happy to be back. As said, so my talk today will hopefully inform you a bit about how the European drone regulations look like, and what can be the consequences, both from a drone manufacturer, obviously, but also for the wider drone community as we go ahead for the next years. Some good words here on the slides, and as some of you will know, regulations don't really come overnight. As the introduction said, this has been a process that's been on the road for just about as long time as in the US, 4 to 5 years. So luckily, you can say we reached the stage where we do have something on paper now. But when we started out in 2015, where EASA, the European aviation regulator, started working on drone regulation, the first thing they did was putting what should be the principles of a new Europe-wide drone regulation. And these are the buzzwords. They sound good, right? Risk-based, operation-centric, permissive, and performance-based. Can anyone here really tell me what that means? Because when I see this, I'm still in doubt. What does this actually mean? So the question is, how will this influence drone operators? How will it influence pilots? And obviously, from a DJI perspective, how will it influence manufacturing and sales of drones? We'll go there. So the good news is the regulations are here already. Published earlier this year, 1st of July, comes into effect, or it came into effect 1st of July. It will start having consequences a year later, so 1st of July next year. It's divided in two different legal texts. It is the Implementing Act that has to do with how you really operate drones and those kind of things, and then it's the Delegated Act that's more important from my side of the table, that has to do with how do drones look like, what are the product requirements that have been put on drones, and they will set the scene for probably the next 5 to 7 years. I should mention here they will apply in Norway as well, because Norway does follow European rules on these kind of things. But the way EU regulation works, it should be about 5 to 7 years, then they will be reopened, and we'll see what we've learned over the past 5 to 7 years. And either we'll add new elements, we'll do something completely different. We'll have to wait and see. Obviously, things are moving meanwhile, even in the regulatory world. So even if this only came about 1st of July this year, after 4 years of work, we've already seen the next kind of things. Some of you have probably seen this. Part of the new drone regulation is the division into categories. In the specific category, there will be a lot of commercial operations. EASA has already published some of the standard scenarios under which drone operations can take place. As well as this is happening a bit more in the hidden, but use-space, as we heard Jay introduce a bit earlier, UTM, there is a draft opinion out from EASA that was circulated to some stakeholders for comments a bit earlier in this year. So even though we haven't really seen the full impact of the current regulation yet, already we are starting to see the next steps. And of course, it all comes down to what Jay had on his slide as well. What's the end game? And it is a full-fledged traffic management system of some sort. I won't go into the details of the different categories on an EU level. I'll just mention that there is the open category. This has to do with the open category. That is essentially all the visual line of sight operations we know today, outside controlled airspace. Then there is the specific category, in controlled airspace, BV loss, a bit of automation, that kind of stuff. And then there is the certified category, which is the one that gets all the headlines, right? It's air taxis, it's package delivery, all that stuff. That's certified. For DJI, open category is pretty important. And as you can see here, this is a bit of a change from where we are today. because the main focus in the open category is about product requirements. And for any of you who own a drone, has flown a drone, know of a drone today, there are no regulatory requirements on the drone, other than a very basic set of principles about radio transmission and should be safe and those kind of things. There are no product requirements, unlike cars, unlike aircraft. So this is the new thing. So EASA has set this as the key element of the new regulation. And as you can see, it goes quite wide. It divides drones into weight classes. It gives them a speed limit. It says that drones should have a height limit, either selectable by the pilot or a maximum of 120 meters, because that's the maximum you're allowed to operate in the open category. It must be safe to control, mechanical strength. You can run through all those kind of things. There are two things I'll point out, because I'll get back to them later. It's the weight classes, and it's the remote ID, direct remote ID. And then obviously for anyone here who's familiar with DJI, geo-awareness, we call it geofencing. But so from July next year, states across Europe will be forced into compiling lists of what information do they want in a geo-awareness system. And anyone selling a drone in the open category will have to take this state data and build it in their system. How it's going to look in a DJI drone? A bit too early to say still, because states haven't actually come out with the data yet. So all of this, as it says on the board, applies for new products being sold in Europe from 2020, and it will apply to all drones after 2022. So if any one of you have a drone lying around for some years that wasn't built according to the specifications, you have about 2.5 years left to use it, because after that date, it will be very restricted how you can actually use it. Specific category. This is quite different, because as you see here, there's no really product requirements. The only requirement is that the drone has to be fit for purpose, whatever that means. Obviously, the main difference between the specific category and the open category is that in the open category, you can essentially go buy a drone off the shelf of a shop, online retailer, you name it, and fly straight away. Specific category, you are still in need of an operational approval from an aviation regulator or a body appointed by an aviation regulator. That's why the other word on the board here is very important, the SORA, the Specific Operations Risk Assessment. For anyone here doing commercial work not familiar with the SORA, this is what you want to learn. Because any operation in the future will be subject to approval through the SORA methodology, with the small caveat that regulators will publish what they call standard scenarios. Standard scenarios are meant to make it easier for you to obtain an operational approval. The delegated act, oh no, this is the implementing act, sorry. So that's the requirements that's more on the operator side. And just to say that this will be harmonization of what we know in a lot of national regulations already. You'll have training requirements, you'll have exam requirements, you'll have a minimum age limit, all that kind of sort. As I said before, standard scenarios, SORA are important, but also the notified bodies and competent authorities are important, because maybe you don't actually have to deal with Luftfahrtstilsynet anymore. Maybe there will be new authorities or companies appointed to take over these kind of responsibilities. But that's for the future to decide. And this will create a common playing field across Europe. So the good thing is, if you are approved to a specific operation in Norway, it could be one of the things we always talk about, inspector of power lines. That approval will actually apply European-wide. So you can take your business to Spain or to Greece or wherever you want to go. This is fairly easy to understand, I hope, but this is a table showing how the open category actually looks in the future. I know it's a lot of small text, a lot of fine print, but the good thing about this table is it actually allows you to start exactly where you need to start. So you can start in the left column and say, what is it I want to do in the open category? Do I want to fly over people? Do I want to fly close to people? Do I want to fly away, far away from people? And then you can go through the whole thing and see what kind of drone will I need for that, what kind of training will I need for that, and give you an idea about that. Or you can look at it from a perspective of what drone do I have, In the middle, you have the MTOM, maximum takeoff mass, and you select the weight of the drone you have, and you can then see what are you actually allowed to do with that drone. And from a drone manufacturer point of view, I can go over in the next column and say main technical requirements, and I can see exactly what is it I need to build into this drone. And as you can see, these are all the elements I mentioned before. And then there are the ones, I said I'd come back to 2 points. Obviously, it's the weight, and then there is the remote identification requirement. So they, as you can see, they apply to most drones, not all, but indeed to most of them. All of this is available online. I'll be happy to talk to anyone about questions about this afterwards, because it is really complex. I know Luftfartstilsynet will talk about the exact Norwegian implementation of these rules as well. But please look up any of us if you have any questions about this. So, if any of you have really been paying attention to the drone debate over the past years, you will know there's one number that's important, one number that's been debated, and it's 250 grams. I won't go too much into detail on the debate about 250, just state that it has won acceptance. And so EASA has defined drones of 250 grams to be safe enough to be flown over uninvolved people. The FAA says it's the safest category of drones that's out there. Now we'll turn to how is industry responding to this. Well, industry likes a challenge, right? So the response from our side is the Mavic Mini, 249 grams. Why did we build this? So essentially, because we are being told it's so safe that you can fly it over people. It's not what a guy like Vern is looking for his advanced police operations, but this is the future of the consumer drone industry. The other challenge, and a bit more in flux, is remote ID. So in the EASA regulation we saw just before, drones above 900 grams, I think. No, drones above 250 grams must have what's defined as direct remote identification. It's not defined more than that. Direct remote identification. And the FAA, this is taken from the FAA drone website, says specifically, remote ID is the next step to enable safe routine operations across our nation. This capability will enhance safety and security by allowing the FAA, law enforcement, and federal security agencies to identify drones flying in their jurisdiction. Okay, so we've got that, but what do we do? Here, industry teams up under ASTM International. That's an American standards development organization. And the work has been going on for, I think, about 18 months. Since the very early days, on an industry-wide standard for remote ID and tracking. So this is the latest table of contents, because work just finished 2 weeks ago. It's still to be finalized and formally published. We'll see that hopefully by the end of the year, maybe first in January, but it's still very much on track. So once we have this, we'll actually have the standard to build into the drones, as mentioned before, to make them directly identifiable. Now this standard contains different technology paths, and you can say in DJI we've put a lot of effort into especially the Wi-Fi option of the standard, and I have a short video I'll show you about that. Should come here. If we do that. Yeah, see, that was too far.
In May 2019, DJI released its Elevating Safety White Paper, outlining a vision of steps we can all take to enhance the safety of drone operations. One of those key steps is remote identification.
Remote ID helps address security and accountability concerns by providing information to authorities that is similar to a car license plate. It is a key solution for safety and security and to enable future complex operations for drones.
DJI deployed the first drone remote ID solution called Aeroscope in 2017. It has been solving security and safety challenges in the real world ever since. While Aeroscope has proved that remote ID works and makes a real difference, it is time for the industry to develop and deploy solutions as well.
DJI has been working with industry peers and government officials at ASTM International to develop a standard for remote ID that can work across the whole industry.
This form of remote ID is compatible with commonly carried devices such as smartphones because it uses a Wi-Fi radio protocol. Wi-Fi is the premier way to connect devices in the modern era, and we are pleased that Wi-Fi Aware from Wi-Fi Alliance provides a reliable, virtually cost-free solution for drone remote ID that can be implemented in many drones with just a software update. Wi-Fi Alliance will help facilitate broad industry collaboration on implementation of Wi-Fi Aware as this solution is adopted by manufacturers and policymakers.
In simple terms, Wi-Fi aware technology uses an encoding that allows identification information to be communicated without using a network system. Instead, this solution listens for Wi-Fi broadcasts in the local area using 2.4 or 5.8 gigahertz.
What's important about the broadcast form of remote ID is the absence of user costs and complex infrastructure. This solution already can work everywhere worldwide using technology that already exists.
Other remote ID solutions that depend on networks of computers would require development of complex backend infrastructure, as well as the need for recurring account fees. We want to avoid these costs because they will complicate implementation for regulators and discourage adoption and compliance. For example, a law enforcement officer may see a drone flying in a park near a sensitive area. Without any special equipment or the need for an internet connection, the officer can open an app and receive the location and identification information.
Another example may be someone flying in the mountains where there is no internet connection. Here, only broadcast technology will provide a solution.
With government agencies and contractors increasingly using drones for their inspections, civilians may use the Remote ID app to learn about drones in use near their home.
With more information available to security officials, law enforcement, and to the public, drone operations become more confident and subject to fewer restrictions and limitations. DJI is happy to support and contribute to the development of these solutions and demonstrate how they work in the real world.
Updating compatible drones requires just a quick firmware upgrade. Once the drone is registered with the authorities in required countries, the registration number can be uploaded through the DJI Go app to the drone. Your drone will now broadcast the registration number while it is in the air and will keep the skies safer for everyone.
So that's the concrete implementation of what Jay mentioned as remote ID. So we're very much looking forward to the FAA's remote ID rule by the end of the year, because we hope it will go along these lines, but now let's wait and see. So summing up, I'm almost out of time. Where does this leave us? Certainly we will have safer products than today, because there are safety requirements being built into all products in the future, right? I didn't touch much on it in this presentation, but use-based UTM is going to be the next step for advanced operations. And advanced to be defined, is it urban airspace, is it controlled airspace, is it BVLOS, is it automated? We will see. That's still in the making. And then finally, obviously, industry is going to keep being ahead of regulations. It's one of the paramount rules of industry, that industry develops faster than regulations. So a thing we've hinted at, Brian hinted at it, we saw some notions of it. Who dares talking about V2V technology? So vehicle-to-vehicle communications. That's something that's currently outside of the scope of regulation, but I think it's going to be inevitable when we talk about drones, when we talk about automated cars, those kind of things. And industry is going to keep being ahead of regulations on that front. For anyone interested, DJI published earlier in the year a white paper called Elevating Safety, where we outlined 10 points that we see as fundamental safety steps to be taken for the future of drone regulation. One of them is mandating ADS-B transmitters on all manned aircraft, because we are building in ADS-B receivers on all heavier than 250-gram drones as of next year. So that could be a very important safety step. There's also some stuff in there on geofencing and some requests from local governments. If you want to, feel free to go to our website and seek out these points. Finally, why are we doing all of this? And it's not just DJI, it's the industry in general, it's AUVSI, it's regulators. Because essentially we want to get rid of this. It's not just the bad headlines, it's actually the safety issue, because even the first one I'm not in doubt of, the other ones here, never documented. Even if they are true or they're not true, they are jeopardizing the future of this industry. And you can say one of the solutions is remote ID, because with remote ID and other counter-drone systems, we will be able to see what is actually happening in the skies above us. Thank you.